Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Two things: download the app, as I always ask you to, share it with your friends. You'll have access to all of our station's content, including our EWTN content. And Joe and I go live Thursday nights, 9 o'clock Eastern Time on social media, X, Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. And remember, all these conversations for Veritas are on there also. So we'd ask you, if you like our content, if you like our conversations, help us out. Like, subscribe, share, help us to get out to a wider audience. Today's conversation, Joe and I always love our conversations, okay? We're always talking about all things Catholic, okay? Catholics and finances. Now, you all out there know I say all the time, in another life, I was a stockbroker for about 10 years. Joe still is in the financial services industry. So we have Chris McMahon here with us today. And Chris is going to talk to us about his new book. So it's Faithful Finances. I think that's an important topic. Faithful Finances, 6 steps to establishing a Catholic financial life. Now, this one's available at Sophia Press. We would ask you to purchase the book through the publisher. I will post a link in the description so that you could go right to the website. You'll get a 15% discount because you know Joe and Joe. Now, Chris is known. Chris is out there. Just a quick backdrop, though. He is the president and CEO of Aquinas Wealth Investors. For over 30 years, he's advised his clients in the areas of comprehensive financial planning, asset allocation, retirement planning, and estate tax management techniques. He's a consultant and advisor to industry professionals on practice management, client care, and comprehensive financial planning. He holds a BA in economics and has earned a CHFC chartered financial consultant and the AWMA accredited wealth management advisor designations. He served as president of the Duquesne University Alumni Board, president of the St. Bernard's Roman Catholic Church Parish Council, board member of Oakland Catholic High School, member of Mount Lebanon Municipal Pension Board, and board member of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation of Pittsburgh. He currently is a member of both the Duquesne University Board of Trustees and Investment Committee. He's a committee member of the Little Sisters of the Poor, fantastic organization. We know about the Little Sisters of the Poor, and a board member of Mary's Place, Pittsburgh, and a board member of Legatus International. I know that was long-winded. Chris McMahon, welcome to the front line with Joe and Joe, brother.
Joe, I'm happy to be here. Sorry for the long intro, so we'll cut that down. But thank you so much for having me. I'm so
no, that's
glad.
All right.
Admire what you guys do, and I'm glad to be here. So thank you.
No, it's awesome.
Honored
like
to
I
be
said,
here.
this is a conversation because obviously Joe and I talk to a lot of people most of the time. Usually something specifically involving or directly involving the church, whether it be Christian morality, Catholic morality, the church itself. But finances is something that often gets overlooked. Just to tell you a quick story, I've heard people say, I don't want to hear the priest anymore talk about abortion and rich people. I'm kind of like, well, you know what? We are Catholic, and there are wealthy Catholics, okay? And there's a way that the church teaches that the view you're supposed to have towards your wealth, which I'm sure this is exactly what we're going to get into. So before we get into it, let me hand it over to Joe, and we'll get rocking.
Chris, we always begin with a prayer to Our Lady in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who sought your help or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, a virgin of virgins, our mother. To you we come, for you we stand, sinful and sorrowful. Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your clemency hear and answer us, amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. But just like a quick rant, Catholic guys have kids. I have 5. I don't know how many
Me
kids
too.
Chris has, but I bet she has a lot. So my point is this: that requires money. I've always said this, like $50 for a box of diapers. And this is not a slight on Catholic education, because I went to Catholic college, and then where basically Chris is, you have Franciscan, a phenomenal Catholic college. You meet some of the kids, and they're like they want to have big families, and that's great, but that costs money. I mean, Joe and I do this for free. I have a job, and so does Joe, and we do this on the side. My point is, you want to have kids, you want to have a wife, you got to work hard. You got to make money. That's a fact, and this is what Chris is doing, and I applaud him for putting his faith into action, because I'm sure he could get a job at like Morgan Stanley or one of the big ones. I've worked at Morgan Stanley for a number of years, and frankly, you can make a lot of money, but he's putting his money where his mouth is. And I just wanted to say that. And people should, Catholics, I always say this, Catholics have to support their own. We have to support our own. The Orthodox Jews do it, and I applaud them for it. We have to do the same thing. So that's my rant. I just wanted to throw that out there. Let's talk about capitalism and conscience, Chris. Can Catholics run a business through the lens of Catholic teaching?
That's a great question, Joe. I didn't for years, right? I had an MFA Wealth, my large, normal, national wealth management firm, MFA Wealth, and that's the way we ran it. Never talked about religion, never talked about politics. And even though my life became more and more Catholic, we had 5 kids too, just like you, Joe, 5 kids growing up. And we said, how do we'd go to church on Sunday. Our kids went to Catholic schools. That was a big part of our life. Joe had mentioned a second ago, I'm on the board of Legatus International. I'm very involved, deeply involved with the Sisters of Life, right? I'm deeply involved with the Sisters of Mary in Mexico City. But my business life was separated. So as my clients would say, you're handling our financial affairs, as they became deeper and deeper in their faith, everyone started to say the same thing. What the heck is going on in the world that is separating us so much from our faith? That basic Judeo-Christian value, right? It used to be that companies had to take care of their employees and companies had to follow the rules, and that was about it. Well, about 8-9 years ago, you guys know it, this kind of wacky, lefty, progressive nuttiness that permeated the universities years before started permeating the executive conference rooms and the boardrooms. And these companies started saying, look, we're going to, these chairmen got under the horrific misimpression that A, they should be progressive, and B, that we care about their opinions. Right? And they started to really promote this as kind of part of their job, as a higher calling. And that's when we could no longer stand beside. We started our company, Aquinas Wealth Advisors, for that reason. We wanted to help people. We wanted to create a Catholic ecosystem where Catholics could live, breathe, just like you said, many other religions do it. Particularly the Greeks do a pretty good job of it. The Jewish folks do a pretty good job of it. But as Catholics, we were always too polite to ever bring it up. We said as things got more radical, we said, let's not even talk about that. Let's don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. What I realized was in my business life, I was talking about it more and more. We actually formed Aquinas Wealth Advisors specifically to help people live in a Catholic ecosystem for money management, lending, and all these types of things. And that's really where the book came from, because we had clients saying, how do I do it? How do I align my faith life with my financial life? And as I was doing, media and talking to people, I said, wait a second, it's important that we give them the 6 steps, because people feel so disconnected from their faith, and they feel like it's such a high mountain to climb. What are the steps I could take? How can I do it? How can I align? That's where this whole thing came from. So it's kind of an alignment of my personal life and my faith life that's really done it.
Chris McMahon is joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Please go out and buy his book. We all need to bone up on our financial savvy. Let's put it like that. As Catholics. So the book is Faithful Finances, 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life. It's available at Sophia Press. Click the link in the description. Chris, I want to stay there for a second, because we're going to get into the progressive left, okay? I know sure. Joe wants to, we both want it, but I'm going to throw that over to Joe. But where I want to go first is the conservative right. What I call, I guess, and you could say it's in a critical way. I try not to be judgmental, but in a critical way. I call them the Chamber of Commerce Christian Evangelical Conservatives, okay? And I don't care if it's them. I don't care if it's Harvard Business School for all their wokeness. We have made idols in this country out of certain things, okay? Maximizing your profit at all costs. Now, even John Paul II, and we'll get into that in a little bit, said, if you don't have a profit, you don't have a company. Okay, I'm paraphrasing. Yes. I read Centesimus Annus a while ago. A profit is the measure of the health of a corporation. But we've turned it into a god. Also, economic growth, which again is important. Okay, but I think as Catholic, I happen to value economic stability with growth rather than growth just for the sake of growth. Now, where am I going with this? Catholic men used to be able to wake up every day when all of us were kids, go out and earn enough money to raise an entire family, not just of 5 kids, but of 8 kids and 9 kids and 10 kids, okay, on one man's salary. And where I'm going and where I'm throwing it over to you is we got to stop with these golden calves that we have that, well, we got to grow. Well, the corporation's got to make as much money as you can. Okay, but if the workers are not participating in that enterprise and are able properly to raise their families, meaning healthcare, sending them to school, making enough money for all the essentials and all that, well, then that's a problem. That's a disconnect. And that's also something that needs to be corrected along with the wokeism.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. There's no question about it. I mean, we are all given gifts from God Almighty, right? If our gifts happen to be to make money, we can't just simply, kind of have that gift become over encompassing, take it and disregard the dignity of the individual and the dignity of the employer. As you know, we're trusted with these gifts from God Almighty, right? We're trusted, and one of our gifts is the ability to make money, create enterprise, and to advance God's kingdom on earth financially. We have to be good stewards, not only the money that we grow. We have to be good stewards of course, we have to be good stewards of the people that we employ. That's extraordinarily important. Molly and I run a conference every year, gentlemen. You'll like this, called Catholics at the Shore. It's in Stone Harbor. It's coming up in about 3 weeks. We get about 300-400 folks to come down there. We have some great speakers. What we try to do is not only have religious leaders, tremendous religious leaders, we also have guys that have just knocked the cover off the ball in business, right? Just really done incredible things, that have done the right things in terms of saying, look, I don't need a fourth helicopter, right, or whatever the heck it is. I need to make sure that I'm giving back to God, and I need to make sure that I'm advancing God's kingdom on earth. In other words, being good stewards, not only as the fruits as we're growing them, but as the wine comes and we actually have the wine, we have to be good stewards and make sure that we share that with the right people. And at the core of all this is the dignity of the individual. And as good stewards, especially people granted with more gifts like we all are, we have a bigger responsibility to advance that kingdom and protect the dignity of the individual, particularly of the worker, and get back to a place where a person, one of my sons is on Wall Street, you guys know all about that, and his life is changing dramatically. He got some great news the other day, and I look at him and say, son, you have to, that's, New York, we want to come back with some of our officers in Pittsburgh. I say, you got to come back over here and work with us in a way that'll grow, allow you to have a family, have a life, have an existence that's better for you, better for your family, better for the society, instead of this kind of two people working and just, as you guys know, burning it at both ends and saying, I need to have that fifth house, and I need to make sure I have the place in the Hamptons, yada, yada, yada. I was on Saturday, guys, the Sisters of Life had a beautiful thing right on 53rd Street. There's Cardinal O'Connor had been gone for 25 years. And I was looking around there, and guess what? Nobody cared less about that third helicopter. They didn't. What they were caring about is those beautiful babies that were right there. And we got to get focused on what's important. What we know, obviously our objective is to get to heaven, get the people around us to heaven, get our employees to heaven. That's got to be our responsibility as Catholic leaders, for sure.
Yeah, it's so funny. We're meeting you for the first time. We have so much in common. Sister Joe and I and our wives are both very close to the Sisters of Life. I'm in Scottsdale, so I got out of Dodge about 3 years ago. We go down and see the sisters all the time. My wife worked with them. Very very close to the sisters. And also, you mentioned the event on the shore. We've interviewed him, but I've become friends with him. Paul Zuccarelli, I think, is one of the speakers at your conference. Am I correct?
You should look into him. He's in Arizona. He's a very successful guy in the insurance business.
Which one is it? I'm sorry.
No, Paul Zuccarelli happened to mention to me.
He's coming. He's speaking.
About the event on the show. He goes, "You going to go?" I said, "I'm not going to be in Jersey that week. Couldn't you guys move it 1 week? I'm going back to Jersey in a couple of weeks, but I won't be there at that time." And we've interviewed him. He's got a great story. He's another guy, made a ton of money and gave up a ton of money to do what he does. Great speaker. But anyway, let me throw it over to Joe. Chris McMahon's with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Please go out and buy his book, Faithful Finances, 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life, available at Sophia Press. Joe Rossinello.
To be Catholic in the corporate arena is, if you ask me, it's the last accepted prejudice.
Absolutely.
I work in corporate America, and because you mentioned wokeism, I want to talk a little bit about ESG, environmental social governance. I want to talk about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. But ultimately, I could just speak for me. I mean, if I said where I work, and I can't say where I work because I get in trouble, but if I said where I work, I believe in marriages between one man and one woman, I'd be fired. Be fired. I can't say that. If I said, me and my wife, we don't use contraception, people would think I was insane. When I had my 5th kid, I told my boss 3 weeks before it. My boss is a managing director. I mean, he could afford 12 kids if he wanted. I was like, yeah, I'm having another kid. He's like, Joe, you're crazy. You're crazy. I mean, like, as if I had like 7 heads. Like, meanwhile, if I put he, him on my title, like when I sent an email out, I'm not crazy. Or if I called myself them, they, I'm not crazy. I see.
Sure.
It should be opposite, but it's not. Um, Someone tried to dox me. I mean, Chris. I mean, I don't know if you. Not that we're not really that big, but like, we talk about everything though on this show. They give us liberty, and we talk about everything. This is an open platform, has been, and it's on the radio. Credit to Steve Lee, who owns it, who also worked on Wall Street and gave up a huge job to run this. Bought it with his own money. Someone tried to dox me. Like I had to explain myself to my boss. Like all I'm doing is being Catholic. I'm not doing anything bad. Talk about that because
Sure.
ultimately, it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
And I agree with you. There is prejudice. The last prejudice, land of prejudice, is for Catholics, right? Christians. There's no question about it. We talk about that all the time. But I do see lots and lots of hope on the horizon. I think the pronouns are going away. It's idiotic. It's going away. It doesn't make sense. And I think it is going away. It's like so many of these things that are just so absurd on their face that you say. And I've made a point of asking folks about it. When I see those pronouns, I'll say, let me ask you a question. Why did you put that on? Why did you do that? And almost always people will say, they're not used to being questioned. They'll say, I don't know. They'll say, well, I didn't want to offend anybody. So, well, think about it. I mean, I think you're certainly questioning and offending people of faith because on some level you're certainly questioning the sovereignty of God, right? When you put that on there, and also your name is Joe. You know what I mean? My guess is Joseph. 99.9% of the world's going to understand. They're not doing it because they don't want to offend people. They're doing it because they want to send a social message. That is going away. So I think the good news is there's more room in the public square for people of faith. I had a great conversation a few weeks back. I was super involved. I was the vice chair of Legatus for a number of years internationally, and I had a great one of those conferences I was just at. One of the West Coast guys, one of the men in white. Why am I blanking on him? The priest.
Norbertines?
Yeah, not the Norbertines, the other ones the Dominicans, right?
Okay,
One
fair
of the
enough.
Dominicans on the West Coast, good guy, I'm very familiar with the guys in Virginia, the guys in New York. I know them all very well. There'll be a bunch of Catholics at the shore, but this guy I didn't know as well, and I saw him. I was talking with him, and I said, "What do you do?" He goes, "My mission, his work is in." He goes to Google. He goes to every Microsoft. He goes to all the Silicon Valley companies, and he evangelizes there, and he has mass there. And I thought, isn't that wonderful that they're allowing him in? I said, they allow you in? He goes, not only allow me in, I'm getting numbers at my masses. So I see more optimism on the horizon. I think you're right. It is absolutely a prejudice, but the good news is it's turning down. And one little thing I would suggest to people, I do a lot of speaking. I say, guys, one little thing you can do, even if you're an employee at a company, so you're not able to set. If you own the company, it's much easier, right? You can certainly be much more free with your faith and so forth. But as an employee, the littlest thing we ask people to do is put a tangible sign of their faith on their desk, whether it's maybe it's on their screensaver, maybe it's on a small, 2-inch, 3-inch crucifix and put it on their desk. And we can't tell you how many times I've seen that change the culture of an office. People are no longer coming by, putting giving them kind of, idiotic stuff that certainly destroys the individual, right, on the internet and jokes and stuff like that. Secondly, people have a tendency to take them more at their uh, as a person, see them as an individual, and also see them as a person of faith. I think Good Friday is another tremendous opportunity for us to get those ashes first thing in the morning and have them at work all day. And I think those kind of little things, that tangible sign of our faith, changes everything. It gives people the freedom, and it gives people. My company is called Aquinas Wealth Advisors. I can't tell you any conversations people say Aquinas. What is that? Or Aquinas? They won't know how to pronounce it. We'll say Thomas Aquinas is a great leader in the church. Tell me a little bit about that. And then they'll start talking about their mother who passed away, or I've been away from the church so long. And the other thing which I found very helpful when I'm talking, particularly to younger people, and they say, I was raised Catholic. They'll say, I was raised Catholic. And they'll say, tell me about that. Help me understand what that means. And about 80% of the time as they talk it out loud, they'll actually say, well, I guess I am Catholic. And I let them get to that conclusion. So I think as kind of older, me, I'm speaking for me, not you two, Joe. You're young men, but for guys that are kind of, a little bit more senior, I think we have a great opportunity to lead and do it in a soft way, right? We don't have to be so aggressive and angry about it. I think we can do it in a beautiful, soft way. However, I'm tired of the guys that say to me, look, I just lead by example. I don't say anything. My example is worth 1,000 more. I think it's more important than that. I think we have to engage people in conversation. We have to talk to them about it. And I think we challenge people to put that tangible sign. Maybe it's a miraculous medal. Maybe it's a crucifix. And when people see that, it can change everything. It can change the whole culture of an office. It can change the world. And that's what I'm hopeful for.
I've actually experienced that. Chris McMahon's joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Like you said, you don't have to. You don't even have to be aggressive. All you have to do is have a sign. People know that you're Catholic. They'll find you. And I won't bore you with all the stories. But people have come up to me with questions about Catholic view on sexuality, all these things, unsolicited, and I give them an honest response. Here's the door is open, and then I zoom right in, like you said, lovingly, with compassion, but at the end of the day, with the truth, because there is no love without truth. Chris McMahon's here at the front line with Joe and Joe. I will make a quick comment, Chris, before I ask you the next question, is that
Sure.
I just think people are fed up with, see, there's a difference between Catholic teaching, let's just say, on homosexuality, and the way we're supposed to treat all sinners, not just, let's
Sure.
say, those who have same-sex attraction, but each other, because we're all sinners. There's a difference between that and insanity. And DEI and the rest of it, I think most people, whether Democrat or Republican, they say, all right, that's kind of insane, and we need to back off from that. But let me go here, because your book is also, you know, we're talking about ideas here, but your book is very practical. It's Faithful Finances: 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life. Okay, how can Catholics, before we go to the break, we have a decent amount of time. How can Catholics pursue financial activities that resonate with their faith, support ethical businesses, okay, seek out ethical businesses? Like I found Ave Maria Mutual Fund that I got from my wife in her IRA. That
Sure.
I forgot his name, but he's always on EWTN talking like you do. In other words,
Sure.
they don't invest in anything having to do with abortion, anything like that. It's all in line with Catholic teaching. You know where I'm going, Chris. I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, Alve is a nice mutual fund family, but that's the problem. That's all that used to exist. They have a mutual fund or two. The Knights of Columbus have a mutual fund or two. But the reality is someone's financial planning involves more than one or two mutual funds. That's why we actually started our company called Aquinas Wealth Advisors, because we wanted to give people transparency to everything they're investing in. So we actually invented a tool called a faith and finance tool that people can go online and put their account in. They have an account at Merrill or wherever it is, and they can link it in, and it gives them their faith and finance score. Shows them, no, it's 2 parts of the score, right? It gives them a grade A through F for their performance relative to the market, because performance is important. It also gives them all of a grade for faith alignment. It shows them all of the infractions against their faith, because otherwise people just don't understand. There's so many nice people of faith that are financial advisors telling their clients, "Oh, I'm looking out for you," or they have they have whatever, they have $300,000, they put 20,000 in a so-called Catholic mutual fund, which is okay, but still. In our business life, we've told so many individuals, dioceses, organizations, how many abortions they paid for, thinking they were aligned in their investments because they didn't have access to the data before. You guys know there's a lot of terrible things in dehumanization and technology around, particularly pornography, and it's really despicable. But the one great thing is now it's pulled back the shroud, if you will. It's pulled back the curtain, where now we let people see everything they're supporting in their financial lives. And unfortunately, so many of these financial institutions have gone particularly woke. Joe was mentioning it a few minutes ago. The companies sometimes they're the last vestiges, you guys, of this kind of super wokeism. About a year ago, I was in New York doing a conference, and I was in a debate with a young man against ESG investing versus faith-aligned investing, and we talked about it. And the guy said, the reason I got into ESG investing is because of my faith. And I said, well, that's fine, but you're wrong. You're completely wrong, because it's born in compassion. These things are born in compassion, and their ideas to be fair and kind, but it's completely misguided compassion, right? That's what's happened. And we need, as people of faith, to say, look, let's use this technology. Let's have people see. Let's have them align their faith. And we're a very powerful group. There's 50% of the country like us. When we start running these companies and say, we will no longer tolerate you in the business of pornography. We'll no longer tolerate you giving money to Planned Parenthood through your subsidiary. We'll no longer tolerate you owning strip clubs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we can't invest in you as a result of that. These companies aren't dumb. The reason guys that Target a couple years ago was selling women's bathing suits in the men's department wasn't because they thought they were going to sell a lot of women's bathing suits. It was because they were forced by the large Wall Street firms to comply with this radical agenda of DEI and get a score called a corporate equity index, CEI score. If your score wasn't high enough, you were displaced as chairman of the company, even if you were profitable. That is the bananas time, and that's calmed down a little bit. There's companies actually annual reports every year. and also reporting secondarily that a second report called the ESG report. So it was a whole cottage industry that popped up. I'm going to get certified. I'm going to get certified. The good news is that stuff's calming down, but we still have to be diligent as people of faith, particularly around things like pornography, particularly around things around abortion. We need to do things. And I think buying a mutual fund, Joe, with one of those guys is fine for the first step, but that's only the first step because 90% of you is still not dyed in the wool, taken care of, making sure we're excluding this. Because as we go back to these companies and say, guys, we write you a letter and say we have to sell this stock because you're doing X, Y, and Z. These companies will start listing. The left was much better at this initially. They did a much better job of it, right? They were demanding things. We were always too polite and too courteous and too embarrassed to say our faith out loud. Now we just have to. The great thing about our country, what a magnificent country we live in. Isn't it unbelievable that no matter whatever your values are, you can support them in your financial life. You can support them in how you live and interact your life. Schwab had done a study recently. You guys may have seen it about 3 months ago. 73% of all the folks that were polled in this survey said that it's important to them that their values are reflected in their financial plans and their financial lives. So that's why we wrote the book, Faithful Finance: The 6 Steps to Creating a Financial Life. That's why we started the company Aquinas Wealth Advisors, and we want to have people have a Catholic ecosystem where they can live, they can do everything. They can have money management, have their estate plan done. They can have all around the country. We want to empower Catholics to live their best lives and to live their most faith-filled lives and to be the good stewards that Christ had intended us to and really has obligated us to do by people of faith, right?
No, absolutely. Chris McMahon's with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. We're going to take a quick break. Chris, real quick. So your financial company, our primary audience is Westchester,
Sure.
Western Connecticut, and Northern Long Island. And needless to say, there's plenty of wealthy
Fairfield
people that
County.
listen to the front
That's
line with
big
Joe and
money.
Joe. Where could they find your
Sure.
your company?
They can find everything on AquinasWealth.com. So AquinasWealth.com, if they go on there, they can learn about Catholics of the Shore, for example, which is the thing we do in South Jersey. They can learn about the book. There's a link right there to buy the book. You can buy it, as you said, at Sophia Press or at Amazon, wherever books are sold. But Sophia, we want Sophia to do it. And they learn all about, they can think about this, you guys. They can actually go on to the website, not even contact us, and do their own faith and finance score and understand and report and understand what they're seeing. So they actually have the power to do it themselves. The reason we're doing that is we want to radically transform the world. We want these companies to come back to neutral. They don't need to give money to Catholic charities. They don't need to give money to the Sisters of Life. And I have lots and lots of board responsibilities. Being on the board of the Sisters of Life is the greatest. There's only 3 of us, and I love being with the sisters, right? And I think all of us have different gifts. But if people can come and do their faith and finance score, all of it's on AquinasWealth.com.
All right, awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned that our audience could buy the book on there too. And I'm going to make sure I check out your services also. And so we're going to take a quick break here at the front line with Joe and Joe. One more time, Faithful Finances: 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life. The author, Chris McMahon, gracious enough to join us today here. So Chris said you could buy it from his website. Also, you can buy it from Sophia. Click the link in the description. You'll get a discount because you know Joe and Joe. So you're with us at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We're way in the breach with Chris McMahon. Chris has written a new book, Faithful Finances: 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life. And that's available now. You could go to Chris's website, which is Aquinas Wealth Management, isn't it, Chris?
AquinasWealth.com. But let's go to your website. Let's get the discount. I'd love everyone to have it. It's fantastic. It's beautiful.
Either way, just don't do us a favor. Just don't go to Amazon. Do us a big favor. Just don't buy it from Amazon, okay? Even if you could throw it in the shopping cart. Take the time as Aquinas Wealth Management or Sophia Press. And I will put links to both in the description. So if you're watching it on social media, you click the link and you can go right there. If you have money and you're interested as a Catholic or a Christian in general or a person of goodwill and not wanting to invest in a lot of these things that these companies are forcing you to invest in, okay, if you buy their shares, then Chris's company is where you want to go. And I'm happy you said, Chris, you could see exactly there's the transparency, which transparency is obviously super duper important. Joe Resinello, where do you want to start the segment?
I want to piggyback off something Chris said because it's important. Leverage. Money is more important than your vote. People who don't work in corporate America don't understand that. There was a time when bishops, when it came to Hollywood, said, if you do this to Hollywood, we're going to tell our people not to see your movie. And it worked. It controlled Hollywood. That has nothing to do with being a bad guy. That's like a dad. Like, I don't want something bad coming in my house. That's why I have a lock on the door. That doesn't make me a bad guy. That just makes me a dad. And I have to watch what comes in my house. All good dads do that. Well, money, that's what unions do. But Catholics, we could do a better job at that. We really can. We let people walk over us. We have, as Chris said, there's so many of us, especially Catholic men out there. If something is bad, like Disney, I'm not giving any money to Disney. I am not giving a cent. I'm not going to Disney because I don't like what they're putting on the television. I'm not giving you a cent. I'm just using that as one example. There's tons of examples like that. We should not support people that not only put out things that are offensive to Catholics, but are outright hostile to Catholics. I can remember, and I'm going to use the company, Starbucks. I can remember a while ago, and I like Starbucks coffee. I like strong coffee. I'm Italian. I drink strong coffee. Starbucks, they said, listen, if you're not for same-sex marriage, we don't want your business. Well, guess what? I'm not going. Bye. I'll go to Dunkin' Donuts. I don't need to go to your business. I don't need to have your coffee. And that's not being a jerk. That's just sticking together because there's strength in numbers and leverage works. Talk about that, because to your point, you're 100% right. Catholics are like, oh, we'll forgive them. Okay, forgive them, but don't give them your money.
Sure, and I think that's so true about the media, particularly. There's so many things that we're looking at like that that are incredible. You know, I can't tell you guys how many Catholic institutions own a stock. It's RS Hospitality Group. I'll think of it 1 second. So the big hospitality group. We look at their investments and say, my goodness, you own this ETF, which is a fund. This ETF owns the hospitality group, and I'll think of the name in 1 second. I'm sorry. All they own is strip clubs. The hospitality group implies that they own, hotels for weary travelers, right? In Phoenix or in New York, that's all they own. It's all gentlemen's clubs. I don't know any gentlemen that go there. And we have Catholic institutions. All of us, as we get older, we serve on financial councils of different, Catholic charities. I'm on many, many of them around the country, and we'll go in and no one questions, wait a second, what are we investing in? What are we looking at exactly? What are we holding? And we're saying, how can we own this? How can we own this stock? Well, because we've been trained not to say anything, be polite, it'll go away. And the reality is that's not been true. They've gotten more and more emboldened over time. Not only being not being subversively against us, being overtly against us, right? I mean, you were mentioning Disney a few minutes ago. The idea remember about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that producer came on and was so emboldened to say that she was going to push an agenda that was completely contrary to traditional family values in every movie she was in. Now, the great news is this. People have had enough, and the people are fighting back in so many different ways. Bud Light, Target, Disney, all these people have really come to the task where they say, wait a minute, we've got to get back to entertaining we don't need to put some heroin in every story that's either, in some kind of odd transgender situation or whatever it is. We can have normal storylines. We can have traditional storylines. For a while, there's always those storylines injected in everything. But the point, I agree with you completely, Joe, that it's our responsibility, particularly as fathers, particularly as business leaders, that we have to say, this is unacceptable. We're going to turn this off. And we're going to turn this off. We're going to tell people why we turned it off, right? We're going to do the same thing with our investments. We're not going to invest in these things. We're not going to support institutions that are overtly hostile towards Catholics. I mean, companies saying that, remember, wasn't it in New York they said that a few years ago? If you're not for, the governor of one of the states said, if you're not for, a woman's right to terminate a pregnancy, we don't want you to live in this state. Can you imagine the hubris of that? How dare you say that? And yet, how many Catholics went and pulled a lever for that particular person, right? So I think more important than ever, it's our responsibility. And as I said before, I'm so optimistic. I'm so excited about the country we live in because at Aquinas Wealth Advisors, we're having an enormous response where people are saying, I want to have my investments here. I want to have my financial life here. I want to eventually have other things like banking services here because I want to support this infrastructure, this kind of ecosystem where I can support what I want to do. Let the guy down the street support what he wants to do. But we can't cut our own hamstrings, right? We can't, as people of faith, deep people of faith, just turn a blind eye to this. and turn a blind eye and say, oh, don't worry about it here. Oh, don't worry about it, particularly in my financial life, etc. That's why the book is written, because people are saying, how do I do this? That's why we wrote the 6 steps. That's why I'm so glad you guys are offering that discount on the book. I'm so happy to get this in as many folks' hands as possible so they can see this and understand the 6 steps they could take to feel better about it. Because when you don't feel aligned, you don't feel good. And you know we have a responsibility to be stewards of the gifts we're given, particularly one of them being the financial gifts. And I think we can do it. And we try to make it kind of baby steps, guys. We said over 6 months, if you take step 1 through step 6, you'll be much, much closer, much better aligned, and much more at peace with it.
No, absolutely. Chris McMahon is here with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. And Chris, the reason why we're not getting into the book so much, we want people to go out and buy it and read
Sure,
it
sure.
and get the 6 steps. So
Sure.
I hope you don't think. And
Oh, that's fine.
Joe and I usually, our heads are usually in ideas. But the practical fact of the matter is that this book is going to be very, very helpful to Catholics. So please go out and buy it. Faithful Finances, and I'll post a link in the description both to Aquinas Wealth and also to Sophia, so you can easily buy the book in either one. Let me give you I want to comment from you on this, Chris, because I think this is important. I thought about this since I was a kid, right? And not that I mean, I strayed away from the church for quite some time in my adult life. I was a stockbroker, so who had time for God when you're a stockbroker? I was young and stupid. Not that I'm not stupid now, but I'm a little bit older. But I remember saying to someone on a Catholic retreat one time, I went to Seton Hall Prep, and they used to do retreats. And I remember asking a gentleman there who was a wealthy guy. I knew he was wealthy because I knew his son. And I said, well, Jesus said that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to go to heaven. And I remember asking the question in this little thing that we were doing. I said, but we're all go to Seton Hall Prep, and our parents sacrifice to send us here because one of the things that we're going to benefit from is we're going to go out and perhaps make a lot of money. We're going to go to better schools, get a better job, like all these things. And I was like, well, how do you square that? And where I'm going with this, and this is where I want your response. My take on it, and having thought about it over the years, is this. You could be a billionaire. A billionaire. Joe, what's the gentleman's name who founded Domino's Pizza?
Oh, it's Ave Maria.
Tom Monahan.
He gave $500 million away.
Get $500 million away to Ave Maria University. Built a university in a town there. Now, here's my question. I'm going to throw it over to you, Chris. My view is that the Lord may very well give you a lot of money. It is a blessing. He might not give it to everybody. He gave it to you, okay? But the question of one has to, especially as a Catholic, you have to ask yourself is, do you own your money, or does your money own you? You know where I'm going, Chris. I'm throwing it over to you.
Well, it's funny you guys brought up Tom Monahan, who I'm very close with. I was fortunate enough to be the vice chair of Legatus for 8 years, and Tom's the chairman. So Tom actually endorsed the book. If you see, so there's very few people in the world I admire more than Tom Monahan, because he built his fortune, and then he became, I'm sure you know the story. He was being a Catholic guy, and he was taking a group over to Rome, and John Paul the Great looked him in the eye and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I think I'm doing everything. I bring people here. I'm a Catholic guy." He said, "You're not doing nearly enough." He said, "You got to use the gifts you have, and you've got to evangelize the world, and you've got to really turn this thing up." And he came back home and radically changed everything, building a humongous house. He stopped doing that. He brought the Dominican sisters to Ann Arbor. He helped he built in the third world. He built a basilica. He started Ave Maria University, which is a wonderful place, right? He was on the board of Franciscan. My wife Molly's on the board of Franciscan. These are all great things, but he got involved with everything. You may know this about Tom. You may not. I'm so honored to speak about him. But matter of fact, I asked him to come speak at Catholic to the Shore this year, and he couldn't because it's an Ave graduation, and he still does 150 push-ups a day, which I admire more than anything. He's 87 years old, I think, which is amazing. So, but Tom, what he does now, he still flies commercial, and he's just recently married. He lost his wife for years and years. He just got remarried, Tom, but he flies commercial, and instead of flying private, which he certainly could do, and he did for a number of years, and he sits in the middle seat. Why does he sit in the middle seat in coach? The person on the left and the person on his right. So think about that for a second. Not too much, not too hard, but he talks to people all the time. His goal is to get as many people, like Tom Monahan, what is your goal? To get as many people to heaven as possible. And so I believe absolutely, if your money, you said it right, you could be a billionaire, but if you're doing the right things, if you're being a good steward, if you're supporting things, Molly and I are super involved with a place called World Villages of Children all around the third world. They have one in Mexico City. If you ever go to Our Lady Guadalupe, it's unbelievable if you've seen Our Lady Guadalupe, right? I know you guys probably been there, but it's only half the trip. Because when you go out and see the world villages in Mexico City, you see the 3,600 little girls brought out of abject poverty, and you see them, the devotion to Our Lady. It's you can't believe what they're doing. They're radically transforming the world. So supporting things like that are amazing, and people of great wealth, have that responsibility. Not even people of great wealth. Let's not leave it to them. It's for everybody's responsibility. Still, the most folks that are modest, have more wealth than 95% of the world. So it's our responsibility to seek out those things. And if we don't have money, that's fine. We certainly have time. We certainly have other talents. We certainly have other treasures. We can give all of that stuff. And I think that's something we need to do as a group. We need to support those organizations which reflect our values. And instead of supporting there's issues, guys, that I have with United Way, right? There's issues with what they're doing, in my opinion, that are contrary to our faith in so many different ways. So I think we need to be stronger about our faith and be less willing to compromise. And I think if we do that, no matter how much money we give away, you don't have to have every penny, because I think, certainly a person of great wealth who has enormous influence, if you ever been up at the Domino's Farms, the building Tom still has where Domino's Pizza started, it's beautiful up in Ann Arbor, and there's artwork lining the hallways, because when Tom met JP2, he had a guy going around the world, John Paul the Great. It was St. John Paul the Great, when he had a guy going around the world buying artwork for him. Think about that. And he said, I never saw a lot of that artwork. It went in cases, it went put away. He said, how crazy is that, right? That you're just buying artwork. Well, it's all hung up on the walls there. And when you buy that artwork now, you could buy any of it. It's all for sale. And it's enormous. It's a 1 million square foot, beautiful office park, beautiful. And they have buffaloes outside and they're petting. It's an amazing place. But all the artwork has already been donated to the Ave Maria Foundation that does work all around the world. Not just the university, but all around the world. So that's a guy, in my opinion, who exemplifies alignment better than anyone I've ever seen. And I see him as a role model. And there's a lot of them out there. And there's younger guys too. And I think we just have to find those role models for us, model their behavior. Joe, you were talking about when you were a young man, you were a stockbroker. My bride always says, don't, thank God, she's known me, we just had a big birthday, both of us. Mine was in January, hers was yesterday. We're still a little reeling in pain about that, but my wife has always said, don't judge the man by the boy. And I'm so grateful that that's what she said, because she knew me when I was a boy, and I was a boy for way too long. Now as a man, I think to myself, what is our responsibility? How do we advance God's kingdom? We don't have to be adversarial with folks. Joe said it before, we don't have to be adversarial with them. We just have to simply do things that are in line with our faith and be comfortable talking to people. We don't have to argue with them. You can talk to them in a very comfortable setting and say, here's what I think and here's why we disagree, and then let's talk about it. Because so many people, I'm sure you've had these conversations where people come to you and say, look, you're a person of faith. I'm struggling. Help me understand this. Or the most powerful thing I've really made a commitment for, you guys, I no longer say I'll pray for you. Right? I used to say you're in my thoughts. Whatever. That means nothing. Nothing. You're in my thoughts. Oh, great. I don't know what that means. I'll be praying for you. I don't have to do it any longer. I say, can we pray now? Which has been a very hard thing for me because I'm a business guy. But I can't tell you the fruits of that. How many times I've said, can we pray now? And the person says yes. I've never had someone say no. And then how other people are in the room or in the club or wherever you are, and they come over and they pray with you. I mean, it's powerful what we can do. We all have that opportunity to transform the world. It's such an exciting time, and I'm very optimistic about the future.
That's awesome. Chris McMahon's with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. I'm going to hand it over to Joe, but I will tell you this, Chris. You reminded me of the line from St. Paul, which pertains to me, and that's why it speaks to me, is what he said, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. When I became a man,
Yes.
I learned to put away childish things. I was like, he's talking about me. Joe Resinello,
Yes.
where do you want to go?
I want to talk about debt, because Americans basically live in debt. I mean, sadly, I've heard statistics that if a bill comes up, $500, a lot of people can't pay for it. I mean, I have a family, things break all the time. I mean, and it costs money, and people are throwing things on the credit card, paying 29% interest. I want to get to the root of it, because ultimately, debt is real. No one can buy a house cash. We all have a certain amount of debt. That's real. I think at the root of it is we don't know who we are. We, as a people, as an American people, sometimes we're trying to keep up with people, keep up with the Joneses, buy things we don't have, need. And ultimately, at the root of it, if we know who we are, I'm a child of God. To be honest with you, if you got $10 in your pocket, you eat lunch for $10. That's it. You don't have to spend $100 and put it on credit, and then that turns into $175. That's the issue. And this is why being Catholic is healthy. And this is where I'm going with it. I know who I am. I'm a regular guy. I got 5 kids. I live in a regular house. I drive a 21-year-old car. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a regular guy.
Sure.
And I do my thing. I pay my bills. I'm not trying to be anything I'm not. And I think when you view the world that way, you don't go into debt. You have debt. Talk about that, because I think,
Sure.
it's important.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that in the book, good debt, for example, and the discipline of budgeting. And the first thing we want to put, Joe, at the top of that list is, how we're going to share our gifts. That's very important too. No matter if it's $1 or $100,000 or whatever the number is, we need to share those gifts that we have. So we need to have the responsibility, and no matter what our income is, to not only take care of our families, take care of ourselves, but also take care of those less fortunate than us. And whether that's a penny, $1 a week, it doesn't matter. That's an important muscle to develop, right? And so we're seeing debt, and we talk a lot about this in the book. We talk about good debt and bad debt, and certainly good spending and effective spending and bad spending. And what we found almost always in the last few years, lots of folks, particularly in their 50s, we're seeing people being let go all the time now. We're seeing companies revamping, letting people go, senior people that should be in those kind of, maybe they just have the kids in college or just out of college, and they're like, boy, this is a terrible time for this to happen. What we found through a disciplined budgeting process, which you talk a lot about in the book, we allow the people to say, wait a second, so maybe look through a different lens and say, as a person of faith, why do I have, we know we're getting killed today on these subscriptions. They started $5 a month and they're $27 a month. When I was a kid, it was a Columbia Record Club that would get you, and then all of a sudden you'd have
I remember that.
payment. Yeah, right. So you get those payments. It's the same thing. So there's a discipline. We've been through this process hundreds of times with our clients, regardless of their level of success. We say, look, how do we go in and budget things? Oh, we have 5 children. My wife isn't going to be able to work any longer, or I've lost my job and I need to cobble something together, which is very, very important. How many people do we know, guys, in youth ministry, right, that have 4, 5, 6, 7 kids?
Oh.
And they're living on $45,000 a year, and they're able to do it. Why are they able to do it? Well, they a couple things they do. They don't waste money. They don't spend money frivolously. Do you guys know the Messy Family Project? They're nice folks. They're out of Franciscan. Mike and his wife, Alicia Hernan. They do a very nice job. They're great folks. There's so many great ministries at Ave Maria, like you guys were talking about, and there's so many great ministries down at Franciscan University. There's just so many reasons to be optimistic. It's amazing. But a lot of that is just talking about this whole idea of building a family budget, building an emergency fund, and then living. It's all about living within our means, right? That old adage, payday. Let me think what it is. Put for your first dollar away, right? Pay yourself first. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a great acronym. Pay yourself first. So in other words, some small amount of money to savings. And the great news is this too. Hopefully, when interest rates, we predict, we were actually on Fox Business just the other day talking about, we think there's going to be 4 interest rate cuts this year. Well, it'll give people a chance to realign their debt, make it a little bit more, probably a little bit more tied to home equity, a little bit more, make it good debt as opposed to bad debt, and then secondarily, eliminate as much as possible. So it's like a muscle we have to build. We have to say, how do I only have good debt? How do I get my debt as low as possible? And how do I get to a place where I can, somewhere along the line, retire with dignity? That's a very important part of it too. But I think
No,
it's all
absolutely.
very doable.
Chris McMahon's with us at the front line with Joe and Joe. Faithful Finances, 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life. Please go out, buy the book. Joe Rossinello, we have a few minutes left.
I want to talk about, like, when you hire people, Chris. Obviously, all bosses, you vet people, you interview people. What are things that you look for?
That's a great question. I think we look for a couple things. First of all, we look for people that are energetic. Number one, and there's an entitlement kind of feeling out there in the world right now, particularly with younger people. We try to get people to understand that, acknowledge it, and say that's not who I am. And they understand it and say, look, we look at people that are energetic, that don't have this kind of feeling of entitlement, and we look for people that tell us stories about who they are. When I say to people all the time, I say, tell me who you are. I'm a 60-year-old financial guy that's super involved with, the faith, and that's what I do. And we have 5 grown children. We're excited to have hopefully a bunch of grandchildren. Who are you? And if, first of all, somebody can't answer that question, that really troubles me. So who are you, number one? But if they start talking about their family first, that gets me very, very excited. Okay. Second thing I think, which is probably more important, this is a little inside baseball for you guys. I like going when we hire people. I like going to a restaurant. The reason I like going to a restaurant is because I like when they hand us the menus that I refuse the menu and say, I tell you what, I like a chicken sandwich and Diet Coke, please. And I look at them. And if someone can't make a decision that quickly, and they have to look at the menu and they have to have a moment of pause and they can't think through just a conversation with me sitting there or someone from my office sitting there and a server sitting there. We're always, I was in the food service business for years, so I'm very keen on treating those people with everybody with dignity and respect. But if they can't kind of pivot and just say, how about a Caesar salad with salmon, right, and an iced tea. If they can't do that, they can't work with us, because what I found is we need people that are able to be comfortable. I always say the same thing, guys. If someone came into our offices, we have offices all over the country, but if someone came into our offices with a running chainsaw and a monkey, I want the receptionist, whoever that is, to whoever greets them, to say, "Hi, how are you? It's so nice to see you. Do you need any oil for the chainsaw? And can I get a banana for the monkey?" I want them to be not unflappable. I want them to be unflappable. Have you ever gone to somewhere and said, "We got to think about the experience of the client, and what does that feel like for them?" When someone, if you would call someone and you'd say, um, you'd hear them say, they pick up the phone and say, there's a Chris McMahon, there's a Chris McMahon here to see you, all confused. Or they'd say, "Hi, Joe, Chris McMahon's here to see you." All the difference in the world. And we need to have people that understand that, and they're worried more about the perception of the person in front of them, as opposed to just their own. I always say there's folks in compliance, and I think, Joe, you were a compliance officer.
Yeah.
There's folks in compliance, there's people in sales. Compliance is critically important, and we're in the investment business. We have a very deep compliance bench, but I want people to have the mind of a person who's in sales. Their perception is, how is this person in front of me? How are they feeling? How are they experiencing it? And I found that in the faith more than everything. In evangelization, guys, I found it more and more and more. I can tell you a very quick story if you'd like to hear it. I think it's a pretty good one.
Please, please.
So Molly and I were walking in Stone Harbor. Stone Harbor is a beach town in South Jersey, and now people say to me, "Hey, you're the Fox News guy," or "I saw you on CNBC," which is funny. Or they'll say, you're the guy from, you're the guy from church. A guy came over and he said, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you after church. I saw you after church, but this is later in the day. We're walking on the street, my wife and I." He said, "You're Molly and Chris McMahon." I said, "That's kind of scary." And he said, "You're from Pittsburgh." I thought I could just hear, we talk funny out here. I thought I could hear my accent. He said, "No, you're Molly and Chris McMahon." I said, "That's even deeper. How do you know that?" He said, "I'll tell you how I know that. 3 months ago, I was walking on the beach, and I had just lost my daughter was pregnant with twins. One of the babies passed inside while she was still pregnant. One baby was delivered, lived 7 days, and passed away. And I was on the beach, and I was forlorn, and I was disappointed, and I was just beside myself, and I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe." And he said, when I was there, and I looked up, and right in front of me was a beautiful nun dressed in blue on the beach. And then she came over to me and she said, and she talked to me for a few minutes, and she prayed with me, and she asked me, and she prayed with me about my two granddaughters that were in heaven. And I need to talk to her because she helped me so much. She helped transform my life. She helped me change everything. And I knew the sister he was talking about. After it took me a few minutes because there was about 8 of them that were down. I said, "I got it." And he said, "What a coincidence that she was on the beach." And I said, "Say that again, please." And he said, "You're right. There's no coincidence. She was answering my prayers." I said, "I think that's probably right." And when I spoke to the sister and connected them, she said, "Chris, where did you see him?" I said, "Well, I saw him on the street, and we were actually praying on the street with him in Stone Harbor. And 3 people on the street came over and prayed with us for his granddaughters." But I said, he saw me in that morning at church, but didn't speak to me at church. He said, "Church." He told me that day he hadn't been in church in 30 years. And just interacting with her on the beach, got him back inside that church, which is beautiful.
That's
And actually, I'm sorry, I got to tell you one more if we got 30 seconds.
Go.
go ahead.
So this is one that somebody came to me and asked me to bring to one of the abortion hospitals. "Can you bring one of the Sisters of Life?" So I called the sisters. They sent somebody, and they gave a presentation. That was just so beautiful. But one thing she said, which was amazing, she introduced me to a mom, and I met the mom, and she was wonderful. And and it didn't occur to me that anything other. I thought she was just a volunteer, and I didn't realize she had been helped by the sisters. And the story was that woman had been married. Excuse me, not married, living with a guy in New York. She got pregnant, and the boyfriend said, "You have to either get an abortion or leave. That's it. Those are your 2 choices." She got an abortion. She deeply, deeply regretted it every day of her life for 3 years. It was a very sad thing, very dark thing, very thing that she was overwhelmed with and didn't know what to do with that grief. Unfortunately, 3 years later, she was still in the same situation with that guy. She got pregnant again, and he hadn't grown at all, didn't regret it, said same thing, have an abortion or leave. And that woman said, I'm never have an abortion, ever. It's the greatest regret of my life. You know, I didn't know what I was doing, and I feel just so embarrassed and frustrated by this horrible thing that I've done. But she didn't have much hope. But she said, when I had my abortion 3 years ago, I remember there was a woman across the street praying the rosary. She didn't see me, but I saw her, and I saw her around the corner of my eye. And I looked at her and I said, I think that woman could help me. This is 3 years later. She went back on her calendar and said it was a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning when I had the abortion. Next Tuesday, she gets in her car, goes down there. The woman's across the street praying the rosary still. Same thing 3 years later. She goes, you don't know me, but I saw you, and I know you could help me. And that woman put her in a car, took her to Sister's Life. That baby was baptized. The woman got in a completely different situation, entered the church, had confession, and it was brought back to her full relationship with Christ. And my point of that is saying we have no idea. That's why I admire so much what you guys are doing. We have no idea the impact we're working, that what we're doing, that they can have an enormous impact that can ripple across the lake like nothing else. That's why I think what you're doing is so important. So thank you
Chris,
so much.
I tell you, I hate to say that we're at the end of the show. I tell you, we could talk to you perhaps. By the way, that woman, I know her, okay? I know about it. I prayed with her by the grace of God, okay? I'm a pro-life backbencher, but I've been down there. She gave up a lucrative career as an attorney, and she's down there numerous times every week. All she's doing is praying. Chris McMahon, what a great conversation, brother. We encourage everybody out there. I'm going to put the links in the description. Buy his book, most importantly, Faithful Finances, 6 Steps to Establishing a Catholic Financial Life. You could buy it at Aquinas Wealth, which I'll put in the link in the description. You could buy it from Sophia Press. I'll put the link in the description. Chris, needless to say, not that you're welcome back here anytime. You better come back here soon, brother, because we could just talk and talk and talk, and that's what we're doing. We're evangelizing. Thank you much. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Honored. God bless you both. Okay, have a great day.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all out there for joining us at the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, 1350 on your AM dial, 103.9 on your FM dial, spreading the truth of the Catholic faith to the New York City metropolitan area. Please, wherever you're hearing this, seeing this, whatever the case might be, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Thanks once again, and remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.